Nathaniel Hackett got his revenge on the Denver Broncos last year. Can the Broncos get it back going to play against the New York Jets here in week 4? It's a special crossover Thursday episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Jets fans and Broncos fans. Jets fans, you recognize my voice. I'm John Butchko, the host of Locked on Jets, along with Sayre Bedinger, co-host of Locked on Broncos. We're here on Crossover Thursday to get you ready for Week 4 action. New York Jets, Denver Broncos, Sunday at MetLife Stadium. You should know that this crossover episode of Locked on Jets, like all Crossover Thursday episodes on the Locked on Podcast Network, is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, Sayre, great to be with you today. As we talked about before we started recording, this almost feels like a divisional game because the Jets and Broncos play practically every year.
I know Cody and I were kind of joking about it off mic on one of our shows earlier in the week. It's like, man, the Broncos and the Jets, it's like they got to finish somewhere other than 3rd or 4th place one of these years, and then we either won't see each other, or you know what, we'll be playing each other again, but we'll both be better for it. So I'm always excited for these matchups, though. Like, it was almost the same exact time last year, the Nathaniel Hackett revenge game there in Denver in the Mile High City, where he's triumphantly walking off the field with Mekhi Becton. It feels like it hasn't been a year since even that happened, but you're right. Here we are again. It does feel almost like a divisional matchup at this point.
And for me, like, that was so crazy because I said after that game, like, Hackett was the Broncos' best player because his play calling, I thought, kept the Broncos in that game, and it was treated at the media like some vindication for him. But
Right.
I think it's fair to say one thing that ties these two fan bases together is Nathaniel Hackett's not a very popular figure in either one of them.
Yeah, no, he's still definitely not beloved by any means in Denver, especially after what we saw transpire last year as he was leaving the field and everything. And certainly Broncos Country kind of, I don't know, last year it was really kind of that revenge for Nathaniel against Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. Now Russell Wilson not even in Denver. So it's going to be one of those things that's like, how many guys are even still holdovers from when Nathaniel Hackett was there? Sean Payton has really changed a lot for this team.
All right, well, Sayre, let's start with talking about the Broncos. What is the big storyline for Denver on offense this week?
Well, can the Broncos build on what they showed against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 3? They scored 26 points, which matched what they had scored in the previous 2 games combined. And the offense just wasn't going, and there wasn't anything happening for them in terms of, Bo Nix struggling to do really much of anything, the running game not getting going. And there's still question marks, no doubt, but you saw some major steps forward for both Bo Nix and other areas of this offense, including the offensive line not giving up any sacks in that game against the Buccaneers. So that was really nice to see. Still a concern, though, is the running game. And really, is Bo Nix going to have that kind of help from the overall running game? Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin, the guys who have been kind of the top 2 backs this season, each of them averaging 2.2 yards per carry. So that's not going to cut it. And the Broncos just promoted Sayre Bedinger from the practice squad, who had a nice game against the Bucs. We'll see how much more involved he is, but it's really, can you build off that success that you had against Tampa Bay, where you weren't not necessarily moving the ball at will, but certainly a lot better than those first 2 weeks.
Now, you talked about maybe the Broncos running game being a concern. Do you attribute some of the inconsistency to the offensive line or the running backs more?
I think it's a little bit of both. The offensive line hasn't necessarily been getting graded super well when you look at the different analytics outlets that grade offensive line play. I don't know enough about offensive line play to know, hey, when I watch this play, is this guy doing his job right? You can tell if a guy's getting pushed back or if a guy's, getting whooped by his opponent one-on-one. But in terms of the run schemes and things like that, I'm not 100% sure on the offensive line. What I do know is this: for 13 straight games, Javonte Williams has failed to reach 4 yards a carry. Now, that dates back to obviously last season. And so I tend to believe that's a little bit more on the back. And because it's happening for both Javonte and Jaleel this season, well, then some people are saying, well, it's got to be the offensive line. So I think that, I don't know, this is going to be obviously a huge test. I'm not sure it's going to be the, light bulb on sort of moment. That it was Javonte all along, or it was the offensive line all along. We do need to see Javonte start doing a little bit more, though, because it just hasn't been there for him for a really long stretch of time.
And, at the risk of asking the obvious question, it always, the quarterback always draws the most spotlight. Early impressions on Bo Nix.
I really like Bo Nix. I think he's poised. I think he's very charismatic out there. He's not like, super rah-rah, not that type of guy, like the big personality type of guy, but he's one of those types of players that I think, man, the team really has rallied around him. And you saw in those first two, like obviously a rookie playing his very first NFL game on the road in Seattle. Like, I don't know that anybody necessarily expected, unless, hey, we would have been nice to see it happen, but nobody really expected him to go off for 350 passing yards and 158.3 quarterback rating, right? So you struggle in the first game. The second game, we saw some strides, and that's what we really wanted to see in week 3. Man, he looked like the same guy that was out there operating really well in the preseason, running the offense, executing confidently, making plays with his legs, not turning the ball over. It was nice to see. And so I think in week 3, did we see the new kind of, floor for what Bo is capable of doing? That's what we're hoping, but I really like him so far a lot.
All right, let's turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball. What's the big storyline for the Broncos in week 4?
Can you keep it up? The Broncos really dominated the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 3. I mean, obviously 26-7, the final score there. Got to Baker Mayfield 7 times, 7 sacks, 13 different players had pressures for the Broncos. 6 different players had a quarterback hit or a sack or both against Baker Mayfield, and they turned the ball over a couple times. They had an interception from Brandon Jones. Riley Moss forced a fumble late. Can the Broncos defense keep this up? They have been outstanding this season, John. I mean, you go back to week 1, 2 safeties forced against the Seahawks, only allowed the Steelers to score 13 points, including just 6 points in the second half of that game, and then against Tampa Bay. So they're on a streak right now where for 6 quarters, they've only allowed 13 points. And dating back 2 weeks, only 20 points. So Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator, has done a great job. It's going to be fun to see how he does going up against Aaron Rodgers and these running backs, because really the Broncos haven't been tested by a group of backs as good as what the Jets have, I don't think. And so I would say that that's one of the biggest things that I'm looking for this defense is, can they keep it up with the Jets running game now having to, I guess, posing a real problem for that defensive front.
You talked about the Broncos offense and their defense, the defense looking good, the offense being inconsistent. And, fortunately for the Jets, their offense played at a high level last week. But that sounds like so many Jets teams I've seen through the years where you can rely on the defense and you don't know what you're getting week to week from the offense.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's unpredictable. And I think that unpredictable nature, is kind of inherent when you have a rookie quarterback under center, right? You expecting the highs, the lows, the growing pains. You hope that, like I said, against Tampa Bay in week 3, you kind of hope that he's now raised the floor, Bo Nix, of what he can do going forward. But we don't know that for a fact. It's always a roller coaster ride with quarterbacks in the NFL. And so we hope that Bo has raised the floor, but at the same time, yeah, that inconsistency is to be expected. And so I guess we'll see which unit, whether it's the unit that we saw in the first 2 games or what we saw last week against Tampa Bay, we'll see which one shows up on Sunday.
Yeah, and like one of the things I've noticed, because I've really looked into this, is even the rookie quarterbacks who really put it together, early in the year, they tend to be kind of inconsistent. There are some good games and some bad games. And like the guys who really succeed as rookies, like they tend to hit their stride like November, December, but like September, October, it's very up and down and you don't know what you're getting week to week.
Yeah, it's good to catch the rookies early on. I feel like that benefited the Seahawks. It benefited the Steelers. It obviously didn't necessarily benefit the Bucs, but I mean, the Broncos were getting a lot of extra possessions for the offense by forcing the Buccaneers to go 3 and out, punting a lot, turning the ball over a couple of times. So you give that young offense an extra couple of opportunities, and if they're not turning the ball over, man, they're still pros at the end of the day. So I'm really encouraged by what we've seen so far. I think even bigger than going into Seattle, though, going into New York is going to be a massive test, especially, like you said, coming off that performance that we saw from the Jets now, who are going to have some extended rest after playing Thursday night. It's one of those situations to where, okay, the offense, hey, if you aren't on top of your game, this team is going to absolutely feast on you and make you look bad.
All right, well, ahead here on this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Broncos, we've heard the Broncos storylines. Let's talk about the Jets storylines, and no surprise, it's going to be about a certain quarterback for the New York Jets. He was the story last week on offense. He'll be looking to build off a strong performance. We're going to talk Aaron Rodgers ahead here on this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Broncos. Our crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Broncos today is brought to you by Game Time. You know that Game Time is the best place to get your tickets. Well, now Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I've used Game Time myself on a number of occasions. I just pull out my phone or device and a couple hours before my event started. I can't believe the deals I've been able to get. And they also show you the view from your seat. I actually went to an event a couple of days ago, and I was kind of disappointed with my seat. I should have used Game Time. My mistake was not using Game Time, because Game Time shows you a picture, so there's no surprises, no obstructed views that you weren't expecting. It is the best place to get your tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm John with Locked On Jets, along with Sayre of Locked On Broncos. We're here previewing Week 4 action. The New York Jets will host the Denver Broncos Sunday at MetLife Stadium. 1 o'clock Eastern kickoffs, 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Well, Sayre, we've talked about the Broncos. I think for the Jets, the big storyline heading into this game, at the risk of giving you the obvious storyline, is the play of Aaron Rodgers. Through the first 2 weeks, I don't think anybody would say Rodgers was bad, but he did not look like vintage Aaron Rodgers. And I think after those first 2 weeks, it was fair to say, you know what, Rodgers is 40 years old. He's coming off that serious injury. You know, how good is going to be his peak? Will we ever see the Rodgers of Green Bay again? And at least for one night last week on Thursday Night Football, you saw a guy who looked like vintage Aaron Rodgers. Now, I think it's fair to ask, you know, how frequently will he be able to do that? Will he be able to do it to the extent he did with the Packers, where it was a weekly thing? But I think if you're a Jets fan, that game gave you hope that you will see the Aaron Rodgers we know, the Aaron Rodgers who dominated the league for so long in Green Bay. So it was something that's been lacking so far. And I've talked about it this week on Locked On Jets, how it was important to go out there and see the Jets play like that, because this is a team that had a lot of hype, but unlike say Kansas City, unlike Baltimore, these guys haven't played together before. So it's one thing to say the pieces are there. It's another to actually see the team go out there and play at a high level, and that begins with Rodgers. The quarterback we saw on Thursday Night Football last week against the Patriots is a quarterback who can take a team a long way.
Yeah, that throw that Rodgers made to Garrett Wilson for the touchdown, I mean, that's a throw that only Aaron Rodgers can make, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's just who he's always been to me, and that's the guy that I'm with you, John. I watched these first 2 weeks of the New York Jets, and I wrote an article on one of the sites that I write for, and I'm like, Aaron Rodgers is out there. I guess a best case scenario for the Jets is they're getting John Stockton, late in his career for the Utah Jazz, where he's an older point guard, but he's still a top tier point guard. He can still play the position. He can distribute the ball. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes out there, but he's not necessarily a game changing player anymore. And then we see the Patriots game, and I'm like, I watched that Garrett Wilson throw, and I see, the plays being made by even Alan Lazard, who, found the fountain of Green Bay youth, I guess, as well. I know he didn't play well last year at all. And then you see him with the shimmy after the catch for the touchdown. And I watched these guys, and I'm like, man, okay, if that Rodgers is who the Jets are getting, then fans are justified in being like, hey, this team can legitimately compete for a Super Bowl. And that I'll be rooting for the Jets if it comes down to it, John, when they get to the final 8 or final 4 of this season and they're going up against Kansas City. I'll be throwing an Aaron Rodgers jersey behind me or something, you know what I'm saying? And being like, all right, let's go Jets. But I don't know if Rodgers is permanently back, that is going to be, if he can put this together, it'll be one of the most impressive things I think I've ever seen, with the Achilles injury, his age, just the sheer fact that he didn't even play that great in his final year with Green Bay. So I think that it's a huge development what we saw last Thursday night.
And one thing that really stands out is he's getting the ball out quicker than he did in Green Bay. And that could just be an anomaly. It could just be a 3-week thing. It could also be that he realizes that he doesn't have the mobility he used to. He's 40. He's coming off that Achilles injury. Now, he did extend a couple plays against New England, but I do think he's a different quarterback. And one of my questions heading into this year would be that I think it was pretty clear going in that Rodgers is not going to be the same guy who would have the ability to consistently extend plays. But would he realize that? Would he adjust his game? Or would he still try and extend plays and maybe not have as much success? And I think in the early stages of this season, you've seen a guy who's kind of adapting to the new normal for him, and a guy who's making quick reads at the line of scrimmage, utilizing these pre-snap reads effectively and distributing the ball where it needs to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in this game against Denver, it's going to be interesting to see how often he does go to that well, because Vance Joseph has been blitzing more than any defensive coordinator in the NFL. He's been mixing up looks. He gave Baker Mayfield a look last week where he dropped 9 guys into coverage, sent only 2 players. And so it's just one of those things right now where Vance is kind of in his bag. So how does Aaron adjust to that based on who he's always been? Like you said, he's always been that guy to extend plays. He's made some of his best plays as an NFL player doing exactly that with the quicker trigger. Now, how does he adapt himself to a team that has been bringing pressure and bringing heat just about as well as any other team in the league?
Now, I think for the Jets, the big story on the defensive side of the ball is the run defense. And it's actually been the story of the season for the Jets. Some weeks it's been bad. Some weeks it's been good. Week 1 against San Francisco, the run defense was awful. They got run all over, a game where the 49ers did not have Christian McCaffrey. Last week against the Patriots, it was very impressive. New England, obviously not the most talented team in the league, but a team that had run the ball effectively through the first 2 games of the year. I was worried about the matchup. Even though I felt the Jets had the talent edge, I felt that the way the Patriots had run the ball perhaps gave them a shot in that game, and the Jets defense really responded. Week 2 against Tennessee was kind of half and half. The early part of the game, the Jets got run all over. The later half, Jets held their own. What's interesting about this Jets run defense is I don't think the defensive line's that great. I think when the Jets have had success, it's been the linebackers. Quincy Williams was a first-team All-Pro last year, and been a number of plays this year where maybe a defensive lineman's gotten taken out of his gap, and Williams has gone and covered. He's a real sideline to sideline guy. Jets have missed C.J. Mosley the last couple of weeks, but Jamie Sherwood, a 4th-year guy out of Auburn, who converted safety from college, has really stepped up. And he was getting a lot of buzz in training camp, and he's been all over the field. So the Jets linebacker position has really done the job, and I think they've covered for a defensive line that's had a few issues this year. And now the question is, which Jets run defense will show up in this one? Will it be the Jets run defense of week 3 where they shut down the Patriots? Will it be the Jets run defense of week 1 where they got run over by the 49ers? Or will it be week 2 against Tennessee where it's kind of half and half?
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that that's what they're struggling with, or that's kind of the unknown at this point, because we talked about in the previous segment, like that's where the Broncos have really stunk offensively, is in the running game. So is this going to be a get right game for the Jets run defense in terms of, all right, you showed something against the Patriots last week. Now can we do it again against Denver this week? I think what we're going to see from the Broncos a little bit more, in addition to maybe some switching up of the personnel at running back, John, I think we may see a lot more runs from Bo Nix, who's been very effective running the ball for this team, not just on broken plays, but designed quarterback runs. It's going to be fascinating to see, especially with, if you have some issues on that defensive line, or guys are maybe getting a little over aggressive. Are the Broncos going to try to take advantage of that by running some of these read option plays that we've been seeing them have success with in the first 3 weeks of the season?
And quarterback scrambles were a big problem for the Jets in week 2. Will Levis broke a couple of big ones. Now, maybe not designed runs, but Levis, they had a couple of plays where the defensive linemen weren't disciplined in their gaps, and Levis was able to take off and break big runs. Well, folks, you've heard about the big storylines for the Broncos. Now you've heard about the big storylines for the Jets. Here on this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Broncos, we're going to give you our keys to victory. We'll hear about the Broncos' keys to victory and the Jets' keys to victory. That's ahead here on this crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode of Locked On Jets and Locked On Broncos is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Now, right now on FanDuel, the Jets are 7.5-point favorites in this game, and the over/under is 39.5 points. So, Jets fans, a lot to be confident about. 7.5-point favorites, $5 on FanDuel gets you $200 in bonus bets. Or Broncos fans, if you think your team's going to be competitive in this one, that could be a pretty good bet for you. Just head to FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com. It's Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm John, the host of Locked On Jets, along with Sayre, the co-host of Locked On Broncos. Sayre, what are your keys to victory for the Broncos in this Week 4 game?
Well, I'm excited. I think the keys to victory for the Broncos in this game against the Jets, number one, be the better running team in this game, which is easier said than done. Number two, keep on holding on to the ball. Don't turn the ball over, especially early in this game. And number three, force turnovers defensively. I said the same thing last week, John, when the Broncos went to Tampa Bay. You go on the road against a tough team with a good quarterback that can run the ball or that has playmakers on offense that can beat you. You need to make sure that you are turning the ball over defensively. And the Broncos, like I said, they've gotten home with the quarterbacks they've played. They've gotten really good pass rush, high pass rush win rate all year. I said it last week to James when we were talking about the Bucs. I'm like, get to Baker Mayfield and force him to make some bad decisions early on in the game. He did exactly that through an interception on the second possession, and it helped the Broncos get out to a 14-0 road lead, and that defense pins its ears back all game long. If the Broncos can do that this week, get to a point where, man, you force an early turnover or you force a couple of 3-and-outs early on in this game, you have to put your foot on the gas as an offense and make sure that you're taking advantage of what your defense is giving you out there. You cannot be going like we saw against Seattle, Bo Nix throwing untimely as if there's ever a timely interception, right? You throw a couple of interceptions, one in the red zone. That's not going to help you win on the road. You got to make sure you're taking care of the football. And I feel like, unfortunately, that, the keys to victory, they can be so basic, right? But it's like, if your team's not doing the basic things well, you want to see that repeatedly over and over again. Now that we saw the Broncos do it against the Bucs, can they do it again here in Week 4?
In your third key speaks to me because that Week 2 game the Jets played against Tennessee, one of the big reasons that they won the game was Will Levis had some really bad turnovers, including one play, which I talk about this like almost every day on Locked On Jets because I still can't believe it. Like, he literally rolled the ball to the Jets. Like, he was being tackled.
Yeah.
He just rolled the ball to the Jets player. I've never seen any. I've seen ridiculous play after ridiculous play by young Jets quarterbacks over the last 15 years, but I've never seen anything like that.
Will Levis is a little unhinged, isn't he? I kind of like watching it. So it's unpredictable watching him. I like it.
Yeah, something exciting is going to happen. It could be good or bad, but something exciting is always going to happen when you're watching him play. So I have three keys to victories for the Jets. One is, I think this worries me because I'm depending on Nathaniel Hackett to scheme something up here. But number one is, I think the Jets need to figure out a way to get Garrett Wilson away from Patrick Surtain. Last couple of years, I think this is a matchup the Wilson struggled with. I think Surtain his strengths match up well against Garrett Wilson, the things Garrett Wilson doesn't do so well. So I'd like to see the Jets try and, use their formations, bunch things up, create traffic, maybe get Garrett Wilson on the move, in motion, try and stick him in the slot, figure out ways to free him up, because I think that's a tough matchup for him stylistically. Number two, I'll elaborate on something you talked about. You talked about the Broncos pass rush. Give Olu Fashanu extra help. Olu Fashanu is making his first career start. He was the 11th overall pick this year. Started the season as the swing tackle for the Jets. Now Morgan Moses is out. He suffered an injury last week against New England. So the rookie's in there. And fortunately for the Jets on the other side, they have a guy who's, as good of a tackle as we've seen in his generation in Tyron Smith. Tyron Smith's not a guy who needs a lot of help. He's playing at a really high level through the first couple of weeks for the Jets, which means you can give – I always feel like you can give one of your two tackles help. And Fashanu is the guy the Jets are going to need to give help in this one. And then my third key for the Jets is throw different looks at Bo Nix. The Jets normally schematically, they're not a team that tries to surprise you. They're a team that is kind of, this is what we do, and we think we can out execute you. That changed a little bit last week against the Patriots. And Patriots are kind of a unique team because they're so focused on the run, but Jets are going up against a rookie quarterback this week. And look, Bo Nix is the most experienced rookie quarterback that's ever played in the NFL, 60 career starts in college. But I still think, no matter how many games you played in college, there are defensive concepts you haven't seen. And as we talked about, sometimes when you get a rookie quarterback early in the season, that's the time to take advantage. You get a rookie. Sometimes even the best rookie quarterbacks, you get to November, December, they start to get comfortable with some of the more complex defensive looks they get. But we're still early enough in the season that maybe you can throw something at Bo Nix he hasn't seen before and force one of those big mistakes.
How about this gauntlet for his first 4 games, right? Mike McDonald calling plays for the Seattle Seahawks defense, then Mike Tomlin for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Terrell Austin obviously is there as well, and then Todd Bowles and the Buccaneers in week 3. And now you get obviously Robert Saleh and the Jets there. So it's a gauntlet for a rookie quarterback to go through, and you're absolutely right. Giving him those kind of looks is going to make it very interesting. Like, how much does he press the ball? Can the Jets kind of rattle him early? Like we kind of saw, I mean, maybe first game jitters, but he was rattled a little bit early on against Seattle and was not really pulling the trigger on the passes deeper down the field. Can they rattle him a little bit early on in this game? Can you get to Bo Nix, who's really good at avoiding pressure and not taking unnecessary sacks, but he's kind of shown that he might put the ball in harm's way to avoid the sack a little bit this year. So we'll have to wait and see, but that's a tough gauntlet for any quarterback to go through, much less a guy making his first 4 starts in the league.
Well, Sayre, it's been great chatting with you once again. This non-divisional divisional matchup is always a lot of fun, and like you said, maybe we'll do it in the playoffs. Maybe we'll get to do it again in January. Like, keep our fingers crossed, right?
That would be fun. Hey, I'll take January football for the Broncos outside of January 1st, where they seem to be playing week 18 every year now or whatever it is. I'll take January football for the Broncos any day. And I'd love to do another crossover. I feel like you and I are kind of just basically like secondary co-hosts at this point, where me and Cody go every day. You and I go every year. It's fun. I love it.
Well, Sayre, it's great chatting with you. Jets fans, tune into Locked On Jets tomorrow. We'll preview the game. Broncos fans, do the same for Locked On Broncos. Until then, it's been great chatting with you all. I hope you have a great Thursday, and we'll do it again tomorrow.